maybe I'll harass you less, maybe I'll harass you more. We'll see how that goes. So I really appreciate you all coming out. One thing I want to start with is a pledge of allegiance. So would you mind leading us since you have the picture? Thank you.
Yep. Very good. Right hand here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. I've also asked Scott Worthington, who lives here in Orem, to say an opening prayer for us.
Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful that we can be together tonight under the favorable circumstances that we enjoy here. We're grateful to live in a time and a place where we're able to have the opportunity to participate and choose those who will serve us in government. We pray that Thou would help those in attendance tonight to be able to learn and to be able to gain from this meeting and others that we attend, that we may have judgment and the ability to choose wisely as we represent those whom are greatest precincts and choose those who will represent us in various ways in our government. We're mindful of the conflicts in our world today. We pray that Thou would help those who are seeking peace and resolution to these conflicts, and they may come soon. And we ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Great. Please come on in. We have refreshments if you'd like it. There's chairs, and if we fill in too much, there are more chairs in here we can get out. Let's have a quick look at the time. So it's 7:09. I have about 10 minutes of prepared remarks. I did this last night. I don't have exactly the same remark, but it took me about 10 minutes. That's going to leave us about a full hour for questions and answers. I really think the most important thing is to give you that time. However, I know there's a lot of similar questions, and so I kind of prepare a little message based off what I have found to be similar questions by many delegates. That being said, we are going to have that Q&A time, but topics you're interested in, I can additionally tailor my remarks or thoughts to what you want to talk about. Maybe you then won't have to ask a question. So just shout it out at me. Don't be afraid. What are your concerns? Questions about county attorney's office? Anybody? Yeah.
Abuse of power.
Abuse of power. Okay, there we go.
Sex trafficking.
Sex trafficking. Okay.
Failure to use power.
Failure to use power. Okay, there we go. Anybody else?
Support of local law enforcement.
Law enforcement.
Why you?
Why me?
Prison reform.
Prison reform. Okay.
The responsibility is related to what the legislature has acted as law.
Okay. I got that one. Thank you. Anybody else?
Safety for victims.
Safety for victims. Come on in. Sir in the back. That hand. No? Okay. Get something out of the pocket. I got it. Okay. That's fine. These are all great topics. Anybody want to throw anything else out? Okay. I'm not covering all of that with my remarks. I can cover most of that in my remarks. For example, the prison, that's not really a Utah County thing, but happy to answer a specific question about that. And so, the way my remarks are structured, I want to tell you a little story about something. It's, I think, something to help you understand at a very practical level what I'm saying the problems are within the Utah County Attorney's Office right now. Then I want to tell you what kind of my purpose is or my goals are, and then some of my plans. I have pages of ideas, right? But I've distilled it down to just some of them. To kind of give you a flavor of what I'm looking to do. That might help you answer why me as opposed to one of the other candidates. Okay, so I know I'm being recorded, so I'm going to make sure to preface this very carefully. I am going to talk about a person's case. I'm not going to mention him by name. You could easily find it in the news media. 2 of these cases are resolved, and 2 of these cases are not. For the cases that are not resolved, one of them is handled by my office. I'm not telling you anything that's not public information, right? So think of it as me relating a news article to you. They're allegations, not proven. However, the stuff about our internal office workings, which is not always public, I have, as a candidate, the ability to speak about my office's internal workings and what's going on, and I will tell you that. But I'm not violating that defendant's or suspect's rights in any way by sharing that with you, because when I'm talking about him, I'm talking about public information. I'm talking about the office, I'm talking about what I know. So as long as we're clear on that, let's get going. Okay, so go back a couple summers ago to summer of 2020. There's a gentleman who gets arrested, cited, charged, and he pleads guilty to running from the cops and a DUI. Now he's put on what we call felony probation. If you don't know what probation is, that just means we didn't send him to prison, we gave him a chance in the community. In this case, there was actually nothing out of the ordinary with that. He was in intensive treatment. The court record shows at the Odyssey House, which is a good program up in Salt Lake. Don't have a problem with that aspect of what happened. But then fast forward to July of 2021. On July 14th of 2021, he is arrested for felony DUI. In other words, he's had multiple DUIs in the past, but he's been convicted of them. Now, because he's on felony DUI, had we actually charged that crime, state law allows us to ask the court to hold that person without bail pending trial because of the risk they present to the community. Doesn't mean the court will do it, but at least we can ask. However, pursuant to office policy and procedure that's still in effect, we did not charge, despite the fact that this was, as allegations go, a clear-cut DUI. Drunk as a skunk, falling over, odor of alcohol, about everything you could possibly do until you get that blood result back, confirming the BAC. Okay? Now, because we didn't do it, he's released. And what happens 3 days later? That gentleman is arrested for being in a car with an open container of alcohol and being intoxicated. He has actually subsequently pled guilty to that, so that is what happened at that point in time. Now fast forward to mid-August 2021. Our office is still sitting on the case. We still haven't figured out what to do with it. So what does the court do? They terminate his felony probation on the prior case. Around September, we do get around to filing that case. That's actually fast. I'll talk about in a second why that's actually fast to only go from July to September. But what do? We file it, we send a nice letter saying, please come to court. We don't ask for a warrant, we don't ask for the judge to hold him without bail, which we still could have had the argument. I don't know at that point the judge would have done it, right? Because the time has passed. And then what happens in October? Does anybody know the story of a mother of two up in Salt Lake, co-owner of a bakery, who got killed by a drunk driver? Yeah, that's him. And now he's facing murder charges. I cannot guarantee, and no one can tell you otherwise, that that mother would be alive today but for my office's delay, but for our choice to not pursue the charges in a way that we could have. But what do we say about the saddest words of tongue and pen? It might have been. And it's infuriating to me personally that this is a consistent problem in my office. Yes, the results in this case probably outstrip most or any other case we have in our office. But the pattern of how we're addressing the cases is exactly the same. I was talking to another attorney this week. Here's two more examples. So, one prosecutor received a DUI case this week from last July. It took us from July to this month to make a decision on that. And then there was a DV case. Anyone want to take a guess when that one happened? Last March. What do you think that says to that woman? That we didn't do anything for a year to intervene.
What case was it?
Those are pending cases.
Okay, I know, but what was the crime?
Oh, domestic violence. Sorry, I used an acronym.
Yeah.
I apologize. DV is domestic violence. Okay, so domestic violence case, right? So what did we tell that woman who had come forward to the police? Well, it took a year for us to do something about it. There are allegations. I don't know how either case will turn out, but when it takes you 9 months or a year to file a case, that's not swift justice. That's not good for the defendant. That's not good for the victim. That's not good for the community. And I tell you these cases just because this is not out of the ordinary with how my office is operating right now. These are 3 cases that show a pattern. So I want to summarize the problem. And I'll step back from an individual case and summarize the problem. Serious crimes are being minimized or ignored. Someone asked about following the letter of what the law is. We're not doing that. We're minimizing. Charges are not being filed in a timely manner. Hearing routinely from different agencies, officers, that essentially a black abyss for months on end. They don't know what's happening. Victims don't know what's happening. Victims are being harmed through such actions as disbanding the Special Victims Unit. I'll come back to that in a minute and explain a little bit more about that. And law enforcement has been so alienated that I truly believe we've lost the ability to work and train together in the most effective way possible to effectively investigate and prosecute cases. You've seen, some of you, the letter of no confidence issued by the Fraternal Order of Police against our city and county attorney. You've seen the reasons they've listed. That should be important to all of you, and it should be something you're thinking about as you decide who should be your next county attorney. Unlike the current administration, I truly believe that properly prosecuting cases, doing it in the correct way, can make a positive difference not only in the victims' lives, but in the defendants' lives. Okay? And that will help the entire community make those differences. Now, so at least my opinion, fixing these problems requires someone with personal knowledge and insight into the office culture and into the policies that have led to these disastrous results. So you're hiring a new chief prosecutor. We have a civil division too. I'm happy to talk about that. It's not in the dire straits as the criminal division is. This election is about hiring a new chief prosecutor. And I submit to you that you need to hire the candidate who's currently working with the victims every day, who's currently going to court at least every week, if not every day, and currently working with law enforcement every day. And that's me. I'm the only candidate doing that right now. And so whoever asked why you, that's one of the reasons why me. Now, if I'm elected county attorney, I have a purpose and I have a plan. Now, if you've read Alice in Wonderland, you know when Alice approaches the tree with the Cheshire Cat, she says, which way should I go? And the cat says, in essence, well, if you don't know where you're going, does it matter much, does it? Right? And that's the same thing. If you have a plan and you don't have a vision or end game in mind, when your plan gets frustrated, because it surely will, I can't tell you without a doubt that surely some portion of our plan will not be successful. And that goes for every candidate. You have to have the proper purpose. And at the same time, you have to have those plans. You can't just say, I want justice in Utah County. I mean, that's a great goal, right? But what does that mean? So let me tell you about my purpose and my plan. So my purpose as county attorney is to serve every individual in our community. Every one of you here, your sons, your daughters, your friends, your neighbors, the victims, and the defendants. We serve all of them. We promote truth, we promote dignity, we promote justice. We need to support victims and hold offenders accountable because we can better them both by doing so. And I truly believe this. I used to practice in constitutional law. We need to do all that using the least amount of government power possible to allow you all to enjoy your rights to life, liberty, and property. Okay? But great. Okay, Adam, typical politician, you said what you want to do, but how do you accomplish all that? Because words don't mean much. But that's what I'm about. Let me tell you how I want to achieve that. Now, we talk about a president's first 100 days, right? Do we really think a president is only judged by their first 100 days? No. But what we're saying is, what did they come in and do immediately, and then what did they set about to do? It sets the tenor of their administration. And I want my administration to be about smart on crime policies that improves all of our lives. So day one, what are some things I want to do on day one? I want to recreate the Special Victims Unit. Now, if you don't know what a Special Victims Unit is, that's a specialized unit that is dedicated to handling crimes that have affected people in specific ways. Generally, these are sex crimes. These are crimes against children, whether physical or sexual abuse. These are domestic violence crimes. And why? It's not to say a theft is not bad, but the way a theft harms you is not exactly the same the way domestic violence harms you or sex crimes harms you. The trauma in those is what we're concerned about. And that's why we call it trauma-informed prosecution. It's national best practice to have a Special Victims Unit, and it was disbanded by our current county attorney. I was on the unit when it was disbanded, and this has led to harm with our victims. It has led to a decreased ability to work with the Special Victims Units or Special Victim Detectives in our various agencies around the county.
What was his reason for disbanding it? He had to have a reason, good or bad, but he had to have a reason.
Fair enough. I hear soft on crime being shouted out. Sorry, what's that?
Is it cost?
I know who it is, but.
Okay, first of all, let's address the cost. Let's address the stated reason. Let's address the reason I believe it was. No, because the number of attorneys didn't change from that, and the workload didn't necessarily change from that, right? The workload has changed, that's because he's chosen to prosecute less crime, right? It is not a cost-saving initiative. It would not cost us more per se. Maybe if we trained more. Training does cost, right? So if we train more, yeah, that costs more, but the personnel costs are not going to be. Now, why did he do it? Now, he's telling you it's to spread around the joy of these cases to all the attorneys in the office, that somehow this gives you more experience. No, I fundamentally disagree with that. That is a philosophical difference. He does not believe in that specialization. I believe that specialization matters. We see it all across various fields. Doctors, contracting work, lawyers, we specialize. And there's a reason for that, because you get better at it. And instead of having 30 hands in the pot going every which direction, we have 6, 7, 8 hands in the pot working together. Now, I remember when I was on that unit, we met at least once weekly all together, and we had serious conversations about cases. And you know what? We were accountable to each other, right? So if I screwed up when I filed a case, if I didn't get it, one of those 6 or 7 other people did, and they're coming to me. Right now, do we have that accountability? No, because the screening team has a group vote, and there's no individual accountability for what's done in that case. Now we have people without training prosecuting these cases simply making mistakes because of lack of training. Sir?
I have a question about, a lot of us may not understand the inner workings of the county attorney's
Sure.
office. I just kind of wonder who is responsible for getting cases on the docket? Are all of those supposed to be?
Did you have this in front of you? That's my next point. Let's talk about that, right?
I'll be quiet.
No, so I fundamentally believe we have to do that. Now let me come back to the question about why he did that during the Q&A session, if that's okay. My next thought is we have to completely reform and reconsider and recreate policies and procedures related to our screening unit. The screening unit is how cases get into our office, right? So the police investigate, they send charges over, whether they've arrested someone or just through a report, and then it comes to our screening unit, who then decides what charges to file. Now, if you look at local news reports, you'll have seen that the data is showing that our district court or felony filings are down by about half. He takes great pride in that. That's a philosophical difference to take great pride in reducing by half. And also increasing the justice court misdemeanor filings by 80%. We'll come back to that point. But we need to fix our attitude towards offenders and victims, okay? Right now we have attitudes of he said, she said cases just aren't provable. That's not correct. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes you can't. Definitely sometimes you can. We need to stop victim blaming. How many times have I seen a note or a comment victim blaming? And that's the excuse to not file a case. Because what we're looking for is excuses to not file the cases right now. Instead of finding the excuses to say, okay, this is what happened, now what's the appropriate outcome? We're reducing charges significantly. I've seen numerous cases of car theft being reduced from a felony down to a misdemeanor joyriding. Seen numerous cases of drug distribution, not being filed as a felony distribution, but as misdemeanor possession. I've seen numerous cases where there's an absolute refusal to enhance theft charges up and to reduce the theft charges that we have now.
Can you go back just a few steps? Did you say victim blaming?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you expound on that just for the sake of me?
I'm a 19, this is not a real case. I'm a 19, 20-year-old co-ed. I go to a frat party at UVU because we know they're wild and crazy. Not at BYU, this is UVU. I'm in a miniskirt. I'm not wearing panties. I get drunk. I get raped. Well, why'd you put yourself in that situation, miss? I mean, that's kind of an extreme example, but it's that thought process. I don't care who you are. You have no blame for being raped, right? Yeah, maybe practically speaking, we should teach our children to have better common sense. But that does not excuse the person who committed the crime. Sure. Okay, and so I have a fundamental philosophical disagreement with how we're prosecuting those crimes. You know, I have little kids, some of you have heard me say I have a 7-year-old, 9-year-old, 11-year-old. What do we teach them? We admit it, we fix it, we move on. What's that key first step? We admit it, right? Certainly, when our kids are doing stupid stuff, sometimes you just gotta tune it out and ignore it. So the example I like to use is when the BYU students go burn the pallets on Utah lakes, sometimes we just send the cops out and disperse and we don't need to put them through the court system. That's true for some of these local cases, right? That's not true of the person stealing $500 of stuff from Home Depot every couple weeks, right? You see the difference between those two types? And when you don't file it, you're not holding them accountable. Accountability doesn't mean necessarily going easy or hard. It means bringing it to the attention of everybody and working through it. That's what accountability is. Sir?
I'm so sorry not to know. Can you tell me what is your, how did you get where you are? What are you in the office and sort of your background?
Sure, do you mind if I hold that until I finish this part?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So after we redo the screening policies, I think we need to reform our plea policies. The focus shouldn't be on an arbitrary number of cases to go to jury trial. The focus should be on justice and doing what's right by the victim, right by the community, and right by the defendant. Sometimes that will be a trial. We could probably stand to use going to trial a little bit more than we do. But an arbitrary number is not going to be the solution. It should be setting clear policies on seeking the best outcome and let the cards fall where they may, right? So that's all stuff I could do on the first day, reforming those policies, recreating those units. I'll go about 2 more minutes and then we'll just open up for Q&A. We'll still have almost an hour. So it's like day 100. My personal experience is as a prosecutor in the office. That's a partial answer to that question. I've been doing this for 7 years. Actually, I think yesterday was my anniversary, or work anniversary, right? And I have served in almost everything you can do in the office, at least on the prosecution side. Come on in, grab a seat. So I've done general felonies, I've done juvenile court, I've done misdemeanor court, I've done major crimes, which is kind of like drug interdiction and gang stuff. I've done the special victims unit, which we just discussed, okay? I have noticed that we could improve our processes in certain ways. For example, you've probably heard of drug court, mental health court, veterans court. We should have domestic violence specialty court, right? Instead of looking at a domestic violence situation and saying, it's not that bad, let's ignore it this time, until it's so bad we can't ignore it, now we're looking at serious jail time because of the damage done. We should be trying to intervene in cases for the betterment of all and get them into an alternative way of thinking about it, right? That's what really specialty courts are. They're alternative resolutions, where it's less antagonistic. We have a judge providing oversight, defense attorney advocating, prosecutors, the victim, and we work together to find a solution that can help everyone. And I can talk more about that. There's a lot of inside baseball there, honestly. But the concept is finding creative, smart solutions to our criminal problems, instead of resigning ourselves to either hitting them on the head with a hammer or not doing anything at all. I think we do need to have better training across the board. I find it fascinating that, for the last 2 months I've been saying we don't have good enough training, and all of a sudden this last week I've seen 2 emails go out saying we're having mandatory trainings this month that we haven't had in a long time. I find that absolutely fascinating. But I think it's a recognition of we do need better training, both related to victims, to make sure those who are handling those cases have the best possible training for that, as well as just across the board, working with the officers. We talked about how relationship with them is bad. We need to start training with them more to understand each other. We also should look at things like the fact that 40 to 50% of people in jail or prison have mental illnesses. How could we intervene better with them, especially when they're committing the lower level crime, to try to address those issues? We can't save everyone. I don't think we can save everyone, but we should at least try to the extent possible. Okay, so I promised I would keep it a little bit on the shorter end so we could have as much time for questions as possible. I'm happy to go into that, what I've said deeper. I'm happy to address other issues. I'll start with your question in the back, sir. Tell me a little bit more about myself, okay? So I'm a 2010 grad of the BYU Law School, graduated with honors. After I left BYU Law School, I spent 2 years doing a constitutional litigation fellowship at the Pacific Legal Foundation in Sacramento, California. You probably are thinking, what the heck is the Pacific Legal Foundation? That's fine. Think ACLU, now think conservative. Okay, that's what they are. They were explicitly formed by former members of the Reagan administration to be in a conservative to libertarian alternative to the ACLU. Okay, so that's what they are. After that, my wife and I, she's from here in Orem, we said, where are we going to go now? We've just had an economic crisis. Things aren't great, aren't many jobs. We want to stay in California? No. And mind you, I love California. I grew up in Orange County. It is not the same California I grew up in. I have resigned myself to understanding what I had is lost. Is not there anymore. My brother still lives down there. He's a cop in LA for 20 plus years. His wife, cop in LA for 20 plus years. It's not a good place to raise a family right now. But we wanted to have a good place. So we came back here, and job market was bad, so I opened up my own law firm, and I ran it successfully for 2.5 years, maybe a couple months shy of 2.5 years, doing criminal defense, until I was in court one day and bumped into the chief deputy of the office. We just got to chatting. I had done an internship in the office. He said, hey, we have an opening. Closes at the end of the week. Why don't you apply? And about 3 weeks later, I was sworn in. And that's where I've been ever since. Did you have any other questions about my answer? I also teach a class at the BYU Law School on criminal prosecution defense. I'm a co-teacher and I'm adjunct. So I teach one class a semester and I do it with the public defender.
I'm trying to understand a little bit of the background here.
Sure.
So we see all across the country, crime is surging, and we have all kinds of prosecutors that are saying they're funded by Soros, and their philosophy is we're not going to prosecute. And so the result has been obvious, crime is way up, people are dissatisfied. So how in the world, in Utah County, in Utah, did we get David Levitt, who says, I'm gonna reduce prosecuting all these cases, and the result's gonna be wonderful?
You tell me, I didn't vote for him.
The state attorney.
Does anyone, okay, does anybody want to be brave enough and say that you voted for Mr. Levitt? Okay, one of you, tell me, why did you vote for Mr. Levitt?
I didn't know any better.
Didn't know any better?
He was a friend.
Friend? Anybody else have another reason?
I like the way he positioned juries.
This juries, okay, right?
He talked about accountability.
Talked about accountability.
That's a strong position that nobody can hold accountable.
Yeah.
May I ask you a question about, when I came in, you were bemoaning the length of time that it took to deal with cases, the backlog or whatever it takes to get something. Doesn't trial last a lot longer than plea deal? Like, are you arguing both sides to say?
So
maybe
I'm
we
going
go
to,
faster,
I'm going to answer that question, and I'm going to do it while I finish off answering his question. Okay. So, question was, how did we get it? And I asked him because he said some good things. The ideas weren't all bad, right? We had a tenor in the country at the time where we looked at tough on crime policies, and that's how the former county attorney was painted, rightly or wrongly. And the delegate said, yeah, we could use a little bit of a change here. Let's try something different. What you didn't understand is that you were going to get policies and procedures that are fundamentally indistinguishable from the progressive policies you're seeing around the nation. I don't care why, I don't care how. He, from all I can tell, honestly believes him, and I will not fault him for pursuing what he honestly believes in. But I will fault the outcome of what he is pursuing. And the outcome of what you're pursuing is these progressive policies that I believe make our community more unsafe and don't adequately address our constitutional needs. So you have a question about
What you're thinking, cite a couple of things you're thinking about.
So I'm segueing into him now. So one of those would be about jury trials, right? And you're talking about the length of time, okay? Which aspect are you most concerned about with the length of time?
You said that you were,
Yeah.
you thought it was bad for people to say, sorry you had to wait a year and a half to get this in front of our...
Yeah, it shouldn't take that long. And in fact, if you charge the case,
Right.
and that's until you file it, okay? Now, if you file a case and you wait a year after that defendant says, I want a trial, that year delay is presumptively something the court can consider for a violation of speedy trial rights, right? So think about that. We're taking 6 months to a year to even file it, which is a time period that the courts consider as, now we're starting to get into no-no land for the constitutional rights of that defendant, right? And so what I'm saying is, there are certainly cases that are complex, that need extra investigative resources to properly investigate. Maybe more needs to be done. But that's not every case. And when we're seeing fairly simple cases that are fairly straightforward, taking 6 months, 8 months, 9 months or more to screen, simply because the policies and procedures in the office caused the delay, not because it was delayed before, not because it needed the investigation, but simply because how he has structured the office leads to that delay, that's unacceptable to me. Does that answer your question, sir?
I guess it kind of does. You're not saying that you would do more or less plea bargaining?
Because plea bargaining is a separate issue. You want to talk about plea bargaining for a
Well,
second?
I'm just saying, wouldn't a plea bargaining situation go faster than a full trial?
Yes and no, but I wasn't even talking about getting. I was talking about even getting this case before a judge,
You're
let
saying you
alone
would
the trial.
make up for it by changing procedures and policies inside the office?
Yeah, but because we can change how we screen cases to more quickly get through these and not have a backlog, right? Now, I know I'm right about the backlog. And I know I'm right because I was told by a member of the administration at the end of the year, last year, that we had over 800 cases waiting to be screened. Then I was told in January that we have over 1,000 cases to be screened. And I'm looking around the office and all of a sudden a lot of people are being called in on extra to screen extra cases, even though they're not on the screening team. That's a tacit admission that what I'm saying is right, that we are far behind and they know it. Ma'am?
I understand that Mr. Levitt got like $4 million increase in budget, and he hired a bunch more attorneys.
A little bit more than that, but yeah.
Yeah. If he's cut down on on caseload, sending it to justice court or wherever. What's he doing with the money?
Well, so part of it, I have to ask him, I suppose. Part of it is we do have more attorneys. Even though we've had a whole bunch leave, we've hired a lot, so we have more attorneys than when he came in. That's certainly part of it. He has his pre-filing diversion program where he's trying to put money into it. You know, I think you should ask that tough question of him. Exactly where all this money going? What justifies reducing your cases that much when your budget increases by $5 million?
What program?
He has something he calls his pre-filing diversion program. Some people know about that, some people don't. Who's heard of that? Yeah, see, that's what I thought. Some people have heard of it. You guys think it's a good idea? Okay. No, I'm asking the people who knew what it was. I'm seeing all of you shook your head no.
It's by the name of it.
Yeah. You know what's wrong with the name of it. Okay. I like this audience. Round of applause. I'm going to answer that question. Was it a separate question?
Separate question.
Okay, let me answer this question.
Cool.
I'll come to you. Okay, pre-filing diversion program. Filing, pretty simple. You file a case. Pre-filing means before you file a case. Diversion also seems pretty simple. You divert. So it's a program whose specific design is to divert cases out of the court system before filing. Now there's several significant problems in my mind with this program. One is there's no proof of concept, right? Who likes Mythbusters? I know it's not on the air anymore. I love watching that show, right? And what do they do when they have a big build? They build a proof of concept. And then they scale. Well, that didn't happen. And I don't know what's going to be said in the next couple of weeks in the election cycle, or maybe during the primary election, about what data he has to say it's a success. Tell you I haven't seen it. Tell you it's not being bandied about the office as a success. Widely in the office, we all see it as this seems like a failure, because we're consistently getting cases that failed out of the pre-filing diversion program. Because how's the program work? We get a case in, we say, it's not that big of a deal, although it probably is. We send them a letter in the mail that says you have 6 months to do something. If you don't, we'll actually file a case. We have lost the most critical 6 months to make an intervention on a low-level offender. Because if we think it's worth expending court resources for, we should do it immediately to try to address the problem immediately instead of letting it lag and sit. Maybe more happens, right? Okay, so here's what I find most ironic about the program. We have someone who got into the office saying, we need to have prosecutors have more oversight, right? That's why we need jury trials. Prosecutors have too much power. And so what's the remedy to the prosecutors having too much power? You take even more power for yourself, and you don't even give them a judge or a defense attorney. You send them a letter that says, I will charge you with this if you don't take this class or pay this fee or do this thing. What could be more coercive than that, right? That's why I think there's a fundamental rule of law constitutional problem with what he is doing with the pre-file diversion.
Is that like an assumption of guilt? That they have to go through and take some class or do something?
No, see, that's the alleged benefit of a pre-filing diversion program, is that there's no assumption of guilt because you haven't actually charged a crime. You just said you do this or we will charge a crime. See, the way I think about this is,
But what if they're innocent? Shouldn't have to take the class.
thank you. That's the way I think. That's the way I think about this, right? Okay, I mentioned earlier there's probably a class of crimes that in an individual case is not the most important to bring into the court system. And if it's not important enough to bring into the court system, leave them for Pete's sake alone, right? But if it's important enough to do it, we do it right. We bring it before a judge, we let them have a defense attorney, and if there's an identified problem or they're innocent, we resolve it at that and they get acquitted or it gets dismissed. But if they've done something wrong, we should be working with their advocate collaboratively to find that minimal amount of intervention necessary to fix the problem. So I'm not saying alternative resolutions are bad. I'm saying the way this is being done strikes me as fundamentally wrong. I promised Adam, right?
Yeah.
Adam, I promised your question next.
You briefly mentioned the burning of pallets in Utah Lake. What's your opinion on prosecuting people that violate the county health orders if presuming we go into more COVID-19 restrictions after the midterms?
Okay, first of all,
Repeat.
he's asking about COVID mask mandates or other COVID mandates.
Correct, yeah, they were violating the mandates and that's why they got in trouble.
Yeah.
Criminal prosecution of it.
Okay. Let me say 3 things about that. First,
What did he ask?
so he's asking, what's my position as a potential county attorney on mask mandates, COVID mandates, and
Prosecuting the violation of those mandates.
prosecuting the violation of those,
Yeah.
okay? Here's my personal opinion and my professional opinion. Personal opinion is mandates are horrible. We should not do mandates. I do not think it's appropriate. I think that we each have our personal responsibility. If someone wants to wear a mask, I see a couple gentlemen wearing masks. Good for you. You know, my personal choice was not to wear a mask. Some of you are vaccinated, some are not. Good for you. Consider your life circumstances and make adult, rational choices. Because my presumption is, no matter who you are, you have human dignity and moral agency, and you should be allowed to exercise it, as long as you're not harming someone. Now, what do we do if the commission disagrees with me and they pass it? I don't think they will. Hypothetically, they do. Okay. Now, what do we do if they do that? And I'm only going to get county cases, right? Not from the police chief. So if the sheriff, I don't think Mike's going to do it. Let's say Mike has his deputies cite people for it. Okay. I will look at each case individually. Because if it gets to the point where the county does that, and it gets to the point where the sheriff has to cite someone, there's obviously something more to this than just the fact that they were not wearing a mask. And so we will look at each case carefully to decide if it's really in society's best interest to prosecute that case. And I would imagine there's probably going to be a time or two where we say no. There's probably going to be a time or two where we're like, this isn't about the mask. This is about you being a jerk and trespassing on someone's private property when they said, please wear a mask. And they're the business owner. You have that right. Fair enough? Yeah. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, they haven't legislated that as law. They haven't deemed that as a criminal offense, nor do they have the direct authority to do that.
This was a hypothetical scenario.
Yeah. To alleviate a lot of people's fears.
I don't think this is happening.
That's not a chance. It's not a criminal charge.
Yeah.
It can't be enforced. It can't be read.
They can be trespassed.
We could spiral out of control with all the asks we can. You've already asked questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask Kirk. I don't think you've asked a question yet.
No.
Please.
I have a question. What is your plan for like strengthening the relationship between the police department and the attorneys so that evidence gets turned in faster? And like, do you have a plan for that?
Well, I've jokingly said that what we're going to do is we're going to have a retreat and we're going to do trust falls. And that's going to fix everything, right? Look, the advantage I have over any other candidate is, right, I've been doing this job for 7 years, interacting with officers. I don't know how many I have programmed into my phone, but it's a lot. And I know the sheriff, and we've had lots of good conversations. I know not all the chiefs, but several of the chiefs, and had great conversations. And see, what people fail to understand that I get, because I grew up in a cop family, my dad was a cop too, is that cops really what they care about is you don't BS them, and that you're honest with them, and that you have mutual respect for what they do, okay? I can't tell you how many times that I've had one of the chiefs or the sheriff or someone else tell me, you know, I didn't love everything about Jeff Buman, the prior county attorney, but we could talk to each other. So how do we repair the relationship? We get into a room with each other, and I sit and I say, I think I understand, but you tell me what your concerns are. And then we start working through the concerns. It's not a magic wave of the wands, but I think I do have the authority by virtue of knowing them and working with them, and they know me, they trust me, that we'll be able to work through that together. And then over time, we can start, repairing each individual aspect. Sir?
So you said you work for constitutional law firms and everything. The report came out a year or two ago that said that somewhere, and I might have the stat a little wrong, but somewhere 95 to 98% of search warrants are being approved in the state of Utah. What can you do? Because that doesn't sound very constitutional. It kind of wipes out the whole point of search warrants if 97% of them are being approved.
Well, I mean,
so what can you do in your office to help with that?
Two sides of the same coin. Oh my gosh, 95% is being approved. What horrible violations are? Thank goodness that the cops are so good. They have an approval rating of 95% because they've been trained so well and they only bring legitimate warrants. See, that's the thing, is I've never thought the number itself is indicative of whether we're doing it right or wrong. We have to actually dig down into it and see. And we look at things like, are judges actually reviewing the warrants? Because if they're reviewing it, this is the neutral detached magistrate. The idea is, if they're actually reviewing it, we should be able to trust them to make that decision. We should maybe spot check warrants, right, and see. And again, this goes back to training, right? If we had a better relationship with the officers, we could do things like host workshops on writing warrants and how to make sure you're doing the right type of warrant in the right scenarios. And I think that's how you solve it. I just don't think a number necessarily tells us the full picture because how you can talk about it both ways. There was someone, you sir, in the back.
What's your office's obligation to confidentiality towards cases that are being investigated, or have been charged, before they're charged or after?
Okay, do you have a specific concern or just broadly
I
speaking?
do have a specific one about the cases in the newspaper just within the last week.
Oh, okay. Well, let's not talk about that one specifically, but at least I understand the context of the question. Okay. Before a case is charged, I'm going to tell you at least what we should, regardless of any ethics rules. We should not be discussing that with people outside of law enforcement, right? Because this is just an allegation, and we have a duty to investigate, and that may require us bringing in an expert, that may require us talking to witnesses about it, but we should not be like releasing an investigation to the media beforehand. Now, okay, now we file a case. Well, we don't have star courts in our judicial system. We abandoned that a few hundred years ago, right? Everything is public. So the moment we file a public charging document, it is a public case and news media can pull it. Now, should we or should we not file a press release? Now, we have ethical rules, and the judge has found in the current murder case going on right now that our county attorney violated those rules with pretrial publicity, right? By things he said. And you have to be very careful. And I teach this to my students. I truly believe it. You have to be so careful because these are just allegations at this point. But there are times when a press release about allegations is appropriate. So let me tell you when I do think it's appropriate to do a press release about an allegation. We have some legitimate public safety concern, right? Perhaps this person has been charged, but they're in the wind for some serious crime. We need to track them down. Yeah, I think it's appropriate at that point to release information to the public, say, this person has been alleged to have done this, we need to find them, please help us find them. So I think that's a legitimate reason. I think a legitimate reason is, there's a case I'm prosecuting right now against a professor at one of our universities up that way. And, you know, I didn't do a press release, I didn't ask us to do a press release, but the news did a story, and what happened? Additional victims came forward. They told us their story because they had heard, and like, I don't fear anymore coming forward. And we filed new charges. So there are definite advantages at times. But beyond those times, we have to be so careful because we don't want the appearance of political favoritism or the appearance of doing it for political reasons, right? We should only really be doing that for limited reasons that have an advantage to the community other than just publicity or to put someone down.
This case I'm referring to is one that affects every delegate in this room because he's running for a county position. And this case was leaked to the press on caucus day. And I want to know, how did that get leaked? When the article says the felony charges were being filed, yet he has not been served those felony charges, and the county knows exactly where this guy is.
You know, so we have to be so careful about pending litigation, what we say. So I'll say this. I have an email copy of the press release that went out that day. It was released by our office, and you should be asking the county attorney or his press secretary why they released that press release. I'm not going to go any more into that. You know, I think it's fair game that cases filed in the news media becomes aware of it, but if you want to know why a press release, you ask them. I had a hand over here and then gentleman in the hat. Was it you with the hand? Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Levitt did not voice his opinion about this until after he got elected regarding the death penalty.
Yeah.
It's suddenly become an issue now, and he's really changed his opinion on many things, but that's a very high-profile opinion. What is your opinion of the death penalty being continued, used as a tool for litigation?
Sure.
What's your stand?
So, short answer and the long answer, right? Short answer is, as county attorney, you're electing me to obey the rule of law. And if you keep the death penalty, which we did, the county attorney should enforce that in appropriate cases. So as county attorney, as long as it's on the book, I will enforce that in appropriate cases. And as simple as that. Now, I will go a little bit further. Look, we live in a conservative community, right? And there are legitimate conservative arguments against the death penalty. I didn't hear them in the last few months during the legislative session, right? I have the utmost respect for the Catholic view, right? That says life is so sacred that we won't even kill someone who's done something so horrible. I respect that to my deepest core, I really do. And I hope that one day we can live in a society where that's a realistic thing that we can enforce through our laws. As a prosecutor, I'm not there. As a prosecutor, I look at it and go, like, no, we should probably keep this on the books. And if we have problems with it, we should reform it. If it's not serving the functions, we should. But I don't think the death penalty is about dollars and cents any more than I think abortion is about dollars and cents. So let's not have that argument. Let's have the argument of, do we as a society think it's moral and ethical? If so, do we think it's fairly and justly meted out upon defendants? And if so, is there any other problem with it? Can we make it speedier? Can we fix the inefficiencies, right? Those are the conversations I want to have. But as your county attorney, I'm just going to follow the law. Fair enough? Sir in the hat?
So my question is this, we just watched the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, okay? And I look at that as, we have prosecutors who basically, you can't touch them. There's nothing you can do. There's no recourse for the most part. If you can, it's absolutely really expensive. The reason I bring up that is because everybody's heard of Kyle Rittenhouse. But I've had family members who, in business dealings, because somebody else that they didn't like their business dealing, they go to a prosecutor and say, oh, these guys are doing something, and they get prosecuted. And in the meantime, because of the prosecution, they have all of their assets frozen to a point where they're indigent. They're, okay, my bank accounts, everything is frozen, so they can't defend themselves in court. And then, so luckily they're able to find an attorney, and after 2 years of hell you can't even imagine, their reputations are ruined, they're financially ruined, they're still trying to get their assets out of the court system, and, luckily they beat the charges, and a lot of the charges, it was so bad to the point where the judge was like, okay, why is this even coming to my court? And I just have to look at it and go, okay, I get that not every prosecutor is like that, but that power is there. And,
Can I have your attention, please? Just a reminder that there is no food or drink allowed in the gym other than water. Thank you.
Doesn't apply to us. We paid the special fee.
So my question is, we had this problem a couple prosecutors ago. I was a delegate years ago, and we had the same problem where he was prosecuting people and losing, and these people, it shouldn't have even been a crime. It should have never, there was no victim. The crime was just even kind of, why are you even doing this? And, you can really mess up people's lives by prosecuting them. And and now we got a prosecutor who, okay, he's letting people who,
We can mess up people's lives by prosecuting them. Let's just not prosecute people.
No,
We won't mess up their lives.
Well, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I get what you're saying. Please continue.
You know what I mean? But but then you have somebody who's actually legitimate and did a horrible crime, and we'll give you 8 months, and then we'll put you on probation, and then they're out on the streets. But then, so that's what I'm asking is, how do we come up with a system where there is accountability? You have prosecutors and judges who, I look at the criminal system that we have today, and I think there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of corruption in our government. There's a lot of corruption in the court system. There's a lot of corruption that's going on, and I'm just looking at this like, okay, how do we protect ourselves from that sort of thing going on? It may not be as prevalent here.
So, sorry, what was that, ma'am?
Like the justice nuts.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
So what does accountability look like to you?
Accountability looks like to me, if you harm somebody, you should be responsible. Okay? That's what accountability looks like to me. I don't care if you're a police officer, I don't care if you're a judge, I don't care if you're a prosecutor. I don't care if you're just an average Joe citizen. If you harm somebody and you do something wrong, you need to be held accountable.
Okay. And what does that look like for a prosecutor?
I think it depends on the case. I think there's some cases where I think there's some prosecutors who should get life in the electric chair. But at least it's smart enough. You know what I mean? But if that makes sense. But in reality, I think, like you take it case by case. Is the guy wearing the mask, or are we prosecuting this guy for jaywalking and it's just an empty street, or are we prosecuting because he ran across the street and caused a 12-car pileup? You know what I mean? And so I think but how do we get to that accountability? And the answer I always get to this question is like, oh, well, we got a better system than China, and it's like,
That to me is not.
So because I don't have a Uyghur Muslim locked in my backyard, we're okay? I can do anything?
So that's what I'm looking at, is like, okay, you know, I don't think anybody should have the ability to, I forget the word where you can't be prosecuted and you can't be held.
So I think you're probably thinking of absolute immunity or qualified immunity.
Yeah, qualified immunity. I think if you're a police officer and you do something that you harm someone, yes, you should be held accountable. I think if you're a prosecutor, you do something, you should be held accountable. Whether that's, you know, I think the last thing I like to see is people going to jail, because I think that's just a waste, but I think restitution, you know, and a lot of our criminal system, you know, we send people to jail and they rot there and then they learn to be really bad people. But I think there needs to be some sort of restitution.
Yeah, so a lot of responses to what you said. You know, you're right, accountability is important. But accountability doesn't necessarily mean put them in prison for 20 years, right? We got to find better solutions. And I've talked about some of the ways I want to find better solutions, right? Practical things I've seen on the ground that I want to do. Okay, but accountability for, say, prosecutors. How can we increase accountability for prosecutors? Yeah, you could convince your state legislature to pass a law getting rid of immunity so you can sue a prosecutor. I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference for lots of reasons. I'm just not sure it would. So how can we, within what we have greater accountability? Well, okay, let's elect a new prosecutor when the prosecutor's sucking at his job. There's one thing, that's why I'm up here, right? Okay, but that's just the tip of the spear, so to speak. When I was in law school, I spent a year working for the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center. That's a branch, I guess you could say, an affiliation with the Innocence Project, who I'm sure many of you have actually heard of, where they look at for DNA exonerations, right? And they do great work, but they make a key problem. They don't necessarily distinguish between prosecutorial misfeasance and malfeasance, right? I'm sure in my 7 years I've screwed up in a case somewhere, right? As far as I know, no one's ever said anything about it, made a big deal out of it, but that's just life, right? We all are not perfect in everything we do.
Right.
And it's not to excuse it, but it's to say there's a difference between that and the prosecutor out there hiding evidence on purpose, right? And we have to treat that differently. So the first one, how do we deal with the first one? Where a prosecutor is trying their darndest and just gets it wrong. A judgment call for whatever reason, right?
See, and I get that, because, you know, I know there's people where they take to court and they bring the best case possible and they still lose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that happens.
And it does happen, and I get that, and I get that happens, but I know there's also like the Rudy Giuliani's of the world where they want to make a name for themselves. So they prosecute, and, you know, it's like, let's throw the wet toilet paper against the wall and see what sticks, you know?
Yeah.
And I look at that and I'm like, that is evil to me. That is absolutely wrong.
But the question is back. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But how do we deal with those two types of things? Because we deal with them differently. You know, if we're just talking about a prosecutor getting a bad judgment call, there's a various ways you can do it. There's a county in Texas. I keep wanting to say in Travis. It's not Travis. It's Long Cave. Cleft County, is that one in Texas? Anyway, whichever it is.
There's a lot of Texas.
Yeah, they did a pilot program, right, where they essentially did what are called public defense vouchers. You know, school vouchers, kind of the same thing. Here's a list of approved defense attorneys. Take it where you want, right? And what they find, they had a control group and the group that got the vouchers. The group that could pick their attorney with the public funds as in lieu of the public defender. The time frame to first interaction with the attorney, less. The total amount of jail sentence served by that group, less. The plea bargain reduced. The number of jury trials increased. So we found a mechanism that actually works to provide a better check on the prosecutors than we give now, right? And maybe that's not the right system for Utah, but the point is, we check prosecutors not by saying prosecutors can be sued more. We check prosecutors by giving incentives and tools to the defense bar to check us. And by giving incentive and tools to the judges to check us. Which is why I keep talking about we can't not charge cases. Because we get to the truth by being in the system with defense attorneys and judges. And I have a lot to say about defense attorneys and how I think they can do better. Having been one, I think I have the ability to say something on that. But that's what I think. Now with malfeasance, there's nothing else I can say other than if I see that in my office, we take the appropriate corrective action. That may be an HR process, that may be a bar referral, that may be firing. It's going to depend on what it is, but we have to treat it seriously and not allow any ethical lapses. You haven't asked one yet, please.
Yeah, so I imagine there's some aspect of people management. There are attorneys, and then there's suddenly you're a manager of attorneys, where you have people reporting to you. I'm curious what your background is for having people that report to you and that you have developed.
That's a fair question, right? And you can point to different things that I think help there, right? Like, you can point to the fact that I've been a team lead in the office. I run our student internship program, or the ones that go through my class, they actually intern in our office. So I run that. You know, I have various other life experiences coaching kids sports. I mean, working with attorneys is not too much different than coaching kids soccer, honestly. But what I think it comes down to is there's different types of leadership styles, right? And you have to pick some. And the way I think about managing an office is actually somewhat similar to the way a coach manages, right? You hire someone who knows the game. You hire someone who knows what they're doing, practically speaking, not because they read a book or sat in an office and watched what's happening, because they've done it. And then that person gets into the office and they set a vision. They set a very clear goal. They set the goalposts, right? Or the sidelines. And they say, gotta stay in here. We set the vision. And then you have to somewhat trust your attorneys. You have to identify who in the office you can trust, who has the attitude and aptitude for every position. You know, there's that business principle that you rise to your own failure, right? You did good at this job. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do that job. And it's actually contrary too, right? You could be kind of a low level, not very good. You actually probably could be a very good administrator. And so the key to me is I will set the correct vision, I will set the correct tone, and because I know the people in the office, I can put the key people in the correct places to assist me in executing that vision. And I think that's the way you go about it. Sir?
Yes, sir. I'd like your thinking on enhancements at sentencing, and maybe contrast that with what's going on now.
Okay. Do you have a specific type of crime, like drug, theft, domestic violence, or just in general?
Just in general.
Okay. I know that the current, whether it's a written policy, a soft policy, I'm not sure. The current push by the boss is that we should not enhance theft crimes. We should not enhance drug crimes. At least occasionally they'll do it on domestic violence, but they don't even do it as often as they could, right? My opinion is the way we should do every case, okay, law school hat for a second, right? I have a whole presentation on this. There's like 26 factors the National District Attorneys Association has said, consider these whether you even charge a case, right? And then once you decide, yeah, it's serious enough to charge them, here's like 30 factors you look at on whether you should charge it what the statute says or do something different. The starting point has to be the statute. And then you have to take into consideration all the wide range of factors, including criminal history, including the amount of restitution, whether it's more civil than criminal, the type of victims, the character of the victims, to what would do justice. And you should see a lot of times where you enhance. And if a prosecutor is doing his job or her job correctly, you're going to see times where we don't enhance. And you're going to see times where we even maybe undercharge from what we could have. Because we're trying in individual cases to meet individual needs. But we cannot just say, I disagree with the law, so I'm going to ignore what the legislature says. We start with what the legislature said. And then, only then, can we say there's a compelling need for justice to not follow that.
Seems like you were talking about this with him, and I didn't ever hear the qualified immunity. I think the police are getting, and all y'all are getting hammered with so many things, and I didn't hear what you.
Oh, I didn't. I guess I didn't specifically answer that. So qualified immunity is a judicial creation by the United States Supreme Court. Has no
real go anywhere, do anything if they continue to prosecute it.
Has no real other basis in that. And so if the legislature changed it, they totally could. They could pass a statute that gets rid of qualified or absolute immunity. But I'm certain what you would see when that happens is we just have malpractice insurance. Like, I don't carry malpractice insurance right now.
I'm talking about from the police officers.
But you see the same, I guarantee you see the same thing, right? I think that's what would happen. It would all come down to money. So we just have an increased cost. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Well, I'm saying that is what the result would be, and so there'd be an insurance carrier that would be looking at it, and you get two results of that. If people could then sue and get a monetary payout if the courts found it by the insurance provider, and it would give incentive to the police if there was a particular cop who all of a sudden their malpractice rates were 4 times everybody else, to do something about that situation. It's not something a county attorney can change.
But doesn't that already exist when people can sue the city for it? I mean, why do you allow people to sue the police officer when you're suing the turnip? When this, I mean, you can't have both.
Well, yeah, you could reform the laws to only have one or the other, right? And I'd expect that probably would be part of the calculus. I'm not saying that's why, I'm saying the reason why you would make that change is because, to a certain extent, it doesn't necessarily come back to the officer when it's against the city, but if against the officer, it definitely does. And so that's why people say it's better. But again, not my job. Okay, hands down for a second. Who has not asked a question that would like to? So, let's just start from the right, and we'll go to the left. Anybody have time? Oh, we got more time. All right, so we'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5 and 6, wherever they were.
So, I have a concern about plea deals.
Yeah.
And that the difference between punishment with a plea deal and actually going through a trial is so great that a lot of innocent people take a plea deal because it looks easier than what they're going to have to go through if they go to trial.
Do you have an example of someone that's happened to?
I don't.
I have one that I could mention. So the gentleman down in Payson was on a public street filming the power plant. That was suspicious.
Okay.
The cops demanded his ID. He refused to give it, and he got a letter in the mail a month or 2 later saying, "We're charging you with failure to ID." I talked to an attorney about it. He's like, he has a great case if this went to trial, but they charged him with a misdemeanor, $100 fine versus probably $4 to $6 grand to take it to trial to get a not guilty. And so they charged him on something that he had a great defense against, but because the plea was so small,
a great defense.
He had a strong defense.
According to the defense attorney, that would have made $4,000 to $6,000 taking the trial.
It wouldn't. He wouldn't. The guy I talked to wasn't defense. But again, that's an example.
My problem is, my only point there is, it is very difficult in some cases to actually tell me that they did it because they were coerced, not because there was good evidence against them. Anyone can say that. I actually do know of cases where there is concerns. The one I like to use is a case that happened in the federal system in New York, where they were looking at 40 years for drugs, for marijuana, and the plea deal offer was 6 months. Okay, that's coercive. Yeah, I agree. Plea bargaining can go too far. Could be more than that, more than just this idea of coercion? Or?
No, and I don't know anything specifically about this office here, but I know that around the country, it's something that's a concern for a lot of people, is that innocent people taking pleas because...
It's a concern. Yeah, I get it. I get it as a concern, right? I teach this, that it's a concern. Okay, 2 things I want to say about plea bargaining that are very important to me. 1, most defendants don't want to go to trial. Okay? I'm confident in that. And I'm confident in that because I've done defense work, and most of my clients didn't want to go to trial. Like, literally just didn't want to go to trial. They may disagree with what the prosecution said, they just didn't want to go to trial. Not because they were innocent, they didn't want to be convicted. Okay? I've asked several defense attorneys in the last few months, like, am I wrong? Have things changed? Like, no, yeah, most of my clients don't want to. Certainly some do, right? But why is that? Because generally the disagreement between us and the defendant is not that they did something wrong. It's the exact level of offense, or they're worried about the exact penalty, right? Remember what I said earlier, where I believe in the fundamental human dignity of every person and their moral agency? That applies to defendants. And I don't want to deprive them of their dignity and agency to choose to take a plea deal, to choose to not exercise their right. Yeah. But how do we prevent it from having these horror stories? I think that's really the real concern. We shouldn't be looking at this as plea bargaining is evil. We should be looking at this as, how can we prevent an individual abuse, an individual injustice? So there's things we can do. Like I said, we get the defense attorneys to do better jobs, right? To really look at these cases more and push us more. Remember what I said about that county in Texas? Well, I have a defense attorney in my courtroom right now that I'm practicing in that is on contract. He's actually a private defense attorney. Don't tell him I said this. I know it's being recorded. He'll probably hear. He makes me work harder than the public defenders. So what happened is a public defender is on a different trial right now for a couple months. They had to hire someone else for their contract. So he's a private defense attorney. He does it very different than the public defenders. He files more motions. He pushes us harder. His tactics are more aggressive. I won't say mean, just more aggressive, right? And he gets better outcomes for his clients because of that. Well, buck up, defense attorneys, do your job. That's one way we ensure plea bargaining doesn't go wrong. Another way that we can do it is just clear office policies. I agree that things can become coercive. So I don't think it's proper to say someone charged with murder to go with them and say, well, you can have a Class B assault, a couple months in jail, and a few $100 fine. Instead, you can have 25 years in prison if you go to trial. That's insane to me, right? We do have to have limits. But the questions should be, what are we serving with the plea bargain? Are we serving the victim? Are we serving the community? Are we serving the defendant? Or are we doing this just with the goal of getting conviction when we have shaky evidence? And as long as we're doing it with the right goals, with the right parameters, I'm not concerned about the horror stories, because I haven't seen them here.
So a couple of people have mentioned that they think violent crime or crime is on the upswing. From your office, from your data, what are you seeing when it comes to crimes, property, for, theft, whatever? And then also, it seems to be that there's a lot of Ponzi schemes in like business, business crime, white collar crime, and it seems like those guys that rip off a lot of innocent people, or maybe someone that was like made a bad choice, was a little bit greedy or whatever. It seems like the business crime people get a different treatment than like the drug crime or the violent crime. And what are your thoughts on that? What would your office pursue?
Several questions, thank you. So let's start with the first about crime rates. It appears to me from what I've read with the statistics generated by like the FBI and stuff, that yeah, some things are a little up, some things are a little down. Violence probably up a little bit, property may be down a little bit, but overall we're pretty consistent over the years at a per capita basis, which means we're actually up in number of crimes because we're growing, right? So it's not like all of a sudden crime is falling. That can explain why the case number is falling. No, it can't. That can't explain it. Anecdotally, I can tell you this: we did some home stuff around the yard and stuff, and went to Home Depot a lot. All of a sudden we showed up at Home Depot one weekend, and what did we see? Locks on everything. That used to be only the Provo one where they had those problems. Now it's here, right? So anecdotally, I can tell you this is happening more. We had our car broken into a couple years ago. So I think it is a problem, and so my anecdotal experience, what the officers are telling me, what's happening on the streets, does match that data, that things are at least the same, if not slightly up in some areas. Now you had a question about what's the office going to do with, say, certain financial crimes that cause a lot of harm, but that maybe don't necessarily get the harsh treatment that violent crimes do. Did I have that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the answer to that is it's hard to get cases right. And it's especially hard because usually when there's a violent crime, there's a bruise or a broken bone or something you can easily point to. And that's a lot harder with like the Ponzi schemes and the multi-level marketing. I would just say that as a county attorney, would take that very seriously, and we wouldn't let them just get off because it's just a financial crime. I hear that too often, not necessarily from prosecutors in my office, but occasionally, or other prosecutors. Oh, it's more civil, it's just financial. They'll let them sue it out. Like, no, like if there's actual fraud and we have the evidence that, we should pursue that. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I believe you were next.
So let's make the assumption that most of these good people are going to believe the sheriff and your current boss is gone.
Okay, sure.
That leaves it you and Mr. Gray.
Yeah.
What are his strong points? You've mentioned a lot of your strong points, and why do your strong points outweigh the strong points you've identified for Mr. Gray?
Yeah, so I like to start with an analogy on this question. Okay. Don't take this wrong, you're a little bit of an older gentleman. So your kids are probably grown. Do you have grandkids?
Yes.
Okay. When your grandkids, let's say you were watching them for the weekend, if they got sick with the flu, what type of doctor would you take them to?
Pediatrician.
Why not a heart surgeon?
Right.
Okay. That's the analogy. That's my point. Jeff Gray has some phenomenal qualities. He's a very intelligent person. He's argued a couple times at the Supreme Court. When I've met him, he's been a very nice guy, right? I find no personal fault in the man, okay? But he is the quintessential heart surgeon when you need a pediatrician, okay? Yeah, I don't talk about it very often. I am proud of the fact that last year Justice Thomas cited me in a case, cited one of my larvae articles. That's awesome. Completely irrelevant to this job, right? And arguing for the Supreme Court does show a certain level of skill and accomplishment, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what a county attorney does. And so an appellate attorney is very different than a trial attorney. And I wouldn't have the idea that I could walk into his office and radically fix some problem if there was, right? That's not my job and it's not my experience set, okay? And any experience that he has in trial work is old. It just is, right? And so you have two main dividing factors, right? One is I have the current on-the-ground experience, which I think is more relevant, and I'll let you judge which type of experience is more important to you for this job. Okay, that's your choice as a delegate. My other thing is we do have some policy and plans that are very different, right? At the superficial level, everybody in society is starting to get into the idea of, oh yeah, disbanding the Special Victims Unit, that was bad. Like, lots of delegates tell me that. Jeff Gray's saying that, and I'm saying that too. That's fine, we both recognize that. What's the next step? I've told you lots of next steps. Domestic Violence Specialty Board. I know from personal experience our Hispanic community is underserved. We need to get Spanish-speaking professionals into the office. And I can go on and on and on because of personal experience. And he doesn't have that personal experience. And you may get lucky, and he may hire the right people or choose the right people. You don't have luck with me. You either believe me and you like me and think I'm going to be good at the job or not, but I can tell you everything I'm going to do. And those are the two main differences. So it's not a criticism, it's just, there's differences. Please make your choice.
Thank you. In the same light, follow-up to that.
Sure.
You came into the office after many experienced people left because of Mr. Levitt.
No, I came in before everyone left.
True.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a cleaning of house, and a lot of people just left because of Mr. Levitt.
Yeah.
Why did some of those? Why are those not staying around to do the same thing? Why are you still there? Why are there not others coming back?
I stayed for a legitimate couple personal reasons. My wife's a prosecutor in the office, and we have a lot of flexibility because of that. We only live here in Orem, and we have young kids, and our rule is always someone is at home with the kids. And so we have the flexibility that someone is always at home with the kids. I can ride my bike to work, so personal reasons. But the real reason I haven't been pushed out yet or haven't chosen to leave yet is I wanted to wait for the election. You know, it got to the point where, yeah, it was bad all along, but the turning point was only in the last year and a half, right? And at that point, I'm like, I'm going to wait for the election, and we'll see what happens. You know, hopefully I can change this. Hopefully you trust me with that. Sorry, was there more to that question?
Well, there were other people.
Oh, and the other people left.
Yeah,
Okay,
so you're getting questions from people that haven't asked questions. Okay, it's just like that. Anyway, so
I was just following up.
I'm going to tell you that they left because they disagree with the policy, and I know some are coming back.
okay, you mentioned domestic violence court.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what you mean, like you compared it to drug court.
Sure.
I'm just curious how you would do that.
Sure. Okay. So let me tell you three things. This is what a drug court or a mental health court looks like when you walk in. Generally, the public doesn't show up. Generally, it's just all the offenders. And then it's very different. You got the judge, and you have a whole bunch of case managers, and you have a defense attorney representative, and you have a prosecutor representative. And it's very collaborative. You know, they do something good, you get a round of applause. If you do something bad, we have a sanction, an immediate, effective sanction, right? And that's different than normal court, which is kind of more of a cattle call. You show up, you just get them through it, right? Wait for that trial day. So those are two very different things. So here's about domestic violence. What do I constantly get from domestic violence abuse victims? I don't want to testify, either because they fear for their safety, or maybe they truly love the man, right? Listen, domestic relationship, there's good things. There are reasons they've gotten into these relationships, right? So they don't want to ruin the relationship completely, or maybe for the sake of the kids, or for the monetary income. And I've had a lot of women tell me, I don't want to testify against him. I just want him to get treatment. So what would a domestic violence court look like? I'm open to discussion with the providers and the sheriff and the courts and the defense bar for exactly how the parameters look. But the basic concept is instead of the normal system where we're duking it out and fighting each other over every last thing, we're coming into it with the understanding of we're there to fix a problem together. Just like with addicts, we try to treat the addiction, and mental health people, we try to treat whatever their mental health system. In this, we would look at the symptoms. And normally, anger management, some mental health issues, but a lot of substance abuse, alcohol abuse, those are the things you'd be looking at fixing in a collaborative process, in a collaborative community, instead of just butting heads the entire time.
So like anger management, like classes, or?
That's a possibility. I mean, I'm just using that as an example of one of the many things you can do.
Is there anything like that going on right now, kind of thing, or is this just your idea?
No, as far as I know, in the state of Utah, they don't have anything currently implemented. I was told last week that someone at the administrative office of the courts is looking at doing a pilot program. I know the county attorney before. His name is Jeff Buman. He's from here in Orem. Some of you probably know him. He actually was trying to get one of these instigated. He says he was about 50, 75% there. All the major players were on board. It was just needed to figure out those last details, right? And so a lot of inside baseball there, but we would just take that plan and then we'd say how we need to adjust for current reality and move forward with it.
Would there have to be like a law from, the state, or?
We have to have judicial buy-in. Clearly, we have to get the courts on board. But there's nothing in our laws that prevent us from doing that type of thing, any more than there's anything in the laws that prevent drug court, veterans court, mental health court. And we just wanted to get to you. Do you have a second?
If they reoffend, then do they get charged?
Well, in my office they would.
Well, I just think it's great that you have that idea. I mean, that shows innovation.
Thank you.
And
I think, remember I made that Mythbusters example?
it just perked my brain. I thought, what is that?
I really think we need to start thinking about smart data-driven projects that we can implement and see what works. And not just say, I hope this works, and just throw $1.5 million at it, like a pre-filing diversion program, but get it going small and then ramp it up after we prove and work out the kinks.
Because I tend to be on the side of, if somebody that's committing these things or whatever can get some kind of treatment, real treatment.
Yeah.
And instead of like a drug court.
Like Dr. Phil would do.
Yeah, like.
Go to jail.
Like a drug court, you have to go through these hoops to try to get this person informed instead of just shove them in jail.
Look, yeah, it's not a solution to our problems to just say we have to prosecute and we have to be tough. But it's not a solution to our problems to try to throw it out of the system and reduce everything and say the solution is a jury trial in every case and we file a third. That's not a solution either. It's not a practical solution. It's not an ethical solution in my opinion. Okay, again, who hasn't asked a question that wants to ask a question? So I already said these two, and then I've seen you, and then we'll circle back around. So in the brown shirt, please. Yes.
What kind of things are done for those who falsely accuse somebody? And basically, there's been several questions that, ruin someone else's life when they haven't done anything. And yet, nothing seems to ever be done to those who are falsely accusing somebody.
Well, yes and no. Okay, we have laws on the book for false reporting, right? And you may disagree with the penalties. You may disagree with whether the penalties are sufficient, but we do prosecute those crimes when we become aware of them. Okay, and we will continue under my administration. I actually haven't seen one in the last couple of years. I don't know if that's because we haven't had evidence of it or because we're just not charged. I truly don't know that. But I would prosecute those because of those harms that you're talking about. And again, we look at what led to it and why and try to see what most benefits them in society in the aftermath. But we can't just let that go either.
I've got a couple rapid fire ones. I hope this is okay. Civil asset forfeiture is a big thing that I've been hearing about for cops. So just take people's money as they're going cross country or going through airport or whatever, seizing large amounts of cash, never filing charges, never getting the money back.
Yeah.
What can your office do to protect our stuff from it? Like, I like cops. I don't like bad cops. Right. So I like good cops. So how can you guys?
3 comments. Nationally looking at things, yeah, there had definitely been civil asset forfeiture abuses. But this was the same problem with my boss and a lot of things that he said. The national problem does not necessarily reflect the local reality. I don't know of any case locally where there has been civil asset forfeiture abuse. If there has been, that's unexcusable, and we should address that. But I can tell you another thing. There has been a concerted effort in the last 5 or so years by various stakeholders, ACLU, the Emeritus Institute, and then on the government side, the statewide association of prosecutors, police agencies, the chief of police, sheriffs, and whatnot, to address some of those concerns. And we have a series of laws right now that are designed to protect the innocent property owners, yet also allow officers to do it when it's legitimate. And no one is happy with it, which means it's probably a pretty dang good law, right? No, literally, they all tell me, there's this good aspect and this bad aspect, we can live with it. Okay. So my fundamental principle is, if you can tell me anything that would both allow officers to do their job when it's appropriate and protect private property owners' property rights, I am in favor of that change. But we've been working really hard the last few years, and I don't mean we as in me, but the state, okay? Now what can I do as a county attorney? Honestly, very little. I do admittedly have a preference for criminal asset forfeiture. If you don't know the difference, civil means you're basically suing the property. It comes from like piracy days back in the 1700s where, great, we got a pirate ship. What do we do with it? Well, civil asset forfeiture, you can't go against the property owner at that point. And that's just led to today, where you're basically going against the property itself. Criminal forfeiture is when you're going against the property owner for committing a crime, and once you convict them, the property is forfeit. And that's the main difference. But because of that, because the police can do civil directly, it doesn't really affect us directly. Like, we don't really do many of those cases, right? We do far more criminal. And that's just practical reality.
Second rapid fire question is self-defense.
Yay.
Like, I don't want to see that being taken away. I don't want to see my right to defend myself being taken away or really infringed upon because the prosecutor decides that this is a feather in his cap or a good way to, like, make an example of me. Like, where do you stand and where's your office going to stand as far as my right to defend myself by any and frankly every means that I see necessary? If there's somebody who breaks into my house,
you know, people always have concerns about putting a feather in the cap or out to get you. I just don't see it, right? What I see is people trying their best and sometimes getting it wrong, right? And the way I see it is, yeah, mistakes can be made, but what do we do about self-defense? Well, as county attorney, I think we should support self-defense, right? But we still have to look at the facts of the case to see if it's legitimate self-defense, right? And if we get it wrong, we get it wrong, and I hope the judge corrects us, right? Because we now have procedures in place to allow that to be addressed before the court, right? You know, as a county attorney, I make a bad decision about self-defense, you all can hold me accountable in a few years, right? But just because someone claims self-defense doesn't mean we can't look at it. We definitely should look at it, right? And we should look at everything in the scenario. We should look at your prior criminal history. Have you been violent with a whole bunch of people in the past? No. Was this someone that got killed has been broken into 20 houses in the last 2 years, and you're saying they broke into mine, right? Like, yeah, I think you should have the right to defend yourself. Our Constitution gives you the right to defend yourself, and I think it's great that people do defend themselves. But like I said, we will just treat each case individually.
And then finally, my last question here was, so with this position you're wanting to get, how much actual courtroom prosecution work, or not, maybe not courtroom, but how much of the prosecution side versus how much of the administration side are your duties going to entail? Are you going to be mainly prosecuting, or are you mainly going to be an administrator now? Because if you're an excellent prosecutor and this job's all about administration, I'd rather have you putting the bad guys away. Not because I don't want you in there, but because I don't want to waste your skill.
You know, I get that. I do think, though, you need a good prosecutor at the top to give that vision to the office and to understand the issues. I can tell you right now, like, our boss doesn't really pitch in that way. I mean, yeah, you can point to a thing here and a thing there, and that's fine. But I know that the previous county attorneys, say whatever else you will about Mr. Buman, like, it was known that he was going to pitch in if there was a shortfall somewhere, right? And again, it's not whether you like him or not, but what do you think of your boss when your boss says, what help do you need? Oh, you're going to go on vacation? Sure, I'll cover court for you that day. You need assistance with trial? Sure, I'll help you with that, right? And so as a county attorney, I think I have to balance the administrative with the encouragement to the deputy county attorneys, right? So definitely it's mostly administration. But I also want to make it a point to pitch in. When we have a screening backlog, what am I going to be doing at nights and on the evenings or on the weekends? I'm going to be screening cases because I think it's inexcusable to take that long. What am I going to be doing if we have a short staff for anything? Well, I'm going to pitch in, right? So mostly administrative, that is correct, but I want to pitch in and be an example of hard work.
Why aren't you doing that right now? Why are you working evenings trying to get the cases through?
Well, why don't you ask David Levitt to allow me to do so and ask him what he says? I mean it. Go ahead, ask him. I'm not invited to do that right now. Other attorneys have been. I haven't been invited. I work my butt off. I work 45, 50-hour weeks every week. And right now I'm campaigning on top of it all, right? So yeah, am I doing everything I can for my cases? I certainly am, and I will continue to have that work ethic. But have you asked a question yet? Because this gentleman hasn't yet.
I haven't, but I would just on that note. So what is your relationship with your current boss, particularly when you're running against him? What are you gonna do if you lose?
$64,000 question. Thankfully right now he mostly ignores me. I'm gonna be blunt about it. He doesn't talk to me very much. He hasn't talked to me very much the last couple of years, honestly. You know,
So it's just the same.
I just don't see him very often. When he has something he needs to talk to me about, he will. But I mean, last time I talked to him was a couple months ago, and it had been at least 6 months before that since I had a personal conversation. Oh, and what am I going to do after? I'm going to win the election.
Richard, what are your thoughts on prosecutorial data collection? You probably are aware that there is a bill in effect that's basically giving kind of a scorecard to prosecutors, and they've asked the agencies to collect that data and to report back to the legislative about that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts regarding that?
Got no problem with that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you would support that, because that is about the only way we could really kind of keep score with some of these. As we well know, there are some overzealous prosecutors out there.
You know what also is the law? That your county attorney is supposed to publish certain policies online. Well, when I last checked, they weren't there. And it's been, in effect, the law to do that for a year.
Oh, I know. And they just raised the amount of the budget to make sure that the different prosecutorial agencies can report that. Because as you know, with the immunity that the prosecutors have and the police, we've got to have some check and balance system that we can kind of note which of those individuals maybe shouldn't be in those positions, and then you, a person of authority, can determine whether or not they should continue.
I think data is great. Okay. And you know, by the very nature of the data, it does have to be, I don't want to use the word sanitized, but anonymized to a certain degree for the protection of individuals. But I think government transparency is critical, and I think we need more of it in this office. Yeah, sorry.
Just a simple question. Just over here, you talked a little bit about leadership. You talked some questions about that. You made the comment that the office is kind of in a big chaos. You've lost attorneys, you've passed, and some coming back. My perception, or my idea to ask it is, what you see you bring to the table to, and when you've talked about a lot of things, but where do you stand by, not necessarily leader, but how do I pull all this chaos in my mind together and move forward and get these attorneys that want to come back if they're coming, or the ones that are dissatisfied with what they're working out, because I assume the office is in disarray in some ways now.
Yeah.
How do you pull all that back together and take that leadership and move forward?
Two examples I like on this that I think are relevant. One, we saw the movie Invictus, right? Okay, there was a scene in that movie, right, where Nelson Mandela has taken power, and all the white people assumed they were going to be fired. They were kind of scared, and I know I have a couple South Africans, and they say like that's kind of like a legitimate feeling that there was that concern. And what did he do? He made it very clear that everybody was welcome if they would pitch in. Okay, anybody know Larry Echohawk? If you're LDS, you probably know him as a general authority. I knew him at BYU Law School. He was a professor when I was in law school. He is a Democrat, you know? Whoa, scary Democrat. In Idaho, where that actually kind of is scary to some people. And he won state level office, and he tells a story about how he went to the office, and he made very clear that I don't care what your political positions are. If you will support my work, you are welcome to work together. And I think that's part of it. the office is fractured right now. There are some deputies who support David. There are some who really dislike David. All among the support staff. I have to make it very clear when I go in that first day that I don't care what happened in the election. It wasn't personal. I don't care if you supported David at the time. I have a vision, and anybody who wants to support the vision of doing justice in Utah County is more than welcome to be in my administration.
And will you get that support from those people? I know that's a loaded question, I understand.
Look, I believe yes.
Okay.
There are the ones that openly...
I know there's always going to be a fragment.
Look, there's a number, and I don't want to violate confidence.
Right.
There is a huge number that have openly said to me, I support you. There are others who I know support Mr. Levitt, and there's others who basically
Just
keep
stand
me
in
out
line
of
and be
this.
quiet.
Even the ones that are keep me out of this, I know. So they got the majority of the office who's going to be fine with this. If there's a few individuals, we'll work with them. You know, I don't want to fire people. I don't want to make like people's lives hell. I mean, there's no benefit to anybody, right? Let everybody keep their dignity at the very least. And so we'll just work through those issues. Is there another question in the back row? Oh, you, sir.
I kind of have two, if you're okay with that. The first one was, I have a personal experience of a relative of mine going through court, went through a plea deal, and at the end, the judge got some information that wasn't proven, wasn't anything like that, and the plea deal was for 12 to 17 years, and the judge bumped it up to 20, even though we found out in the law that the max was 10. If something similar like that, I know, it was weird. It's federal, whatever.
Oh, the feds. There's a whole other system. Yeah, go ahead.
If you found out that defendant got an extra 10 years, would you say something to the judge? Would you be able to do anything about that?
Look, there's a book called Doing Justice. I don't know if I've mentioned it in this town hall yet. Written by a former prosecutor. He was an appointed U.S. attorney in New York. And one of the main things he says is, do the right thing for the right reason and do only that. And to me, that's the mantra of what a prosecutor should be doing. And could anyone in here not honestly tell me that if you found out someone was wrongfully convicted or serving more than they should, that the right thing is not to bring that to the attention of the courts? We also have an ethical duty, I think, to do it, right? Beyond just what's morally right. But yeah, I think that's an obligation that we have if we discover something went wrong, to rectify it how we can. We cannot rectify everything. But when it comes to a sentence or it comes to a conviction, we can take that back to the court at least. We can't give them money out of our budget. We can't do a lot of things to fix it. But that we can do, and that we should do, and that we will do.
The appeal process is also works for some people.
I hope it works. You have one more part?
It's probably a little off the cuff, but do you know anything about the ESG scores? And what's your stance on them? Do you know?
I heard about that for the first time like a week or two ago. Nothing to do with my office, and I don't think I know enough about it to speak to you intelligently in front of a group about it. I mean, I've heard about them. I know that this is like the China's social credit score. I get that. I want to look more into that to be informed.
Okay.
But that's, sorry, I don't really have a good one right now.
That's fine.
Ma'am?
Who's funding you? Who's funding your campaign?
Well, let's see. George Soros. So there's a guy named Joe Biden. Have you met him? So I have put some of my own money into it. My family has put some money into it. A gentleman who knows that he will not always be anonymous, but is a known person, fairly prominent, has given me a fair amount of money. And then the rest of it is people. I have people I don't even know who have donated to me. Former prosecutors, a couple prosecutors in the office, a couple random people, all put together. That's what I have. No corporations, no big evil people.
Do you have a website?
Website? Yes, sir. It's adamforutahcounty.com. In the back, and then Adam.
You talked to some of this before, but I'm having trouble understanding how the office works and how big it is. Why are you not able to affect change at the level you're at right now, and how will you change things in the future so that people that are in your position that may have problems with what you're doing, your policies, or have even just suggestions and want to help you make a better office?
Yeah,
Does that make
so
sense?
why? Because that's not how the boss runs the office.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. He doesn't want my input. He's made that very clear to me. When I tried to give input, he made it very clear to me that he did not appreciate my input. That's fine. That's what it is. He's the boss, and I fully, look, as a deputy county attorney, I fully believe I have the obligation to follow every order from the county attorney. And if I don't like it, I can quit like the other 23 people who did, okay? I decided to tough it out instead, right? Now, I think the other question I think is the more important. How do you create an office culture where feedback is prized? And do you know how you do that? You sit and you listen and you tell them thank you. Not that they're idiots or stupid, but you legitimately just tell people, we want your feedback, and then you don't penalize them when they give the feedback. And if there's fear in the office, there's creative things you can do. You can do like the kind of the anonymized Dropbox type, not like the service Dropbox, but like an anonymized, suggestion box. I mean, there's things you can do to get past people's reluctance, right?
Yeah.
It's why we have anonymous HR surveys in the county every year, right? But I really think we can create an office culture, because we used to have an office culture where you could give that feedback and it wasn't always followed. I know that, but it was appreciated, right? And people like that. I said, Adam, you're next.
Hypothetically, if the
thanks for coming, guys.
Incumbent were to be the victor in the general election, are you worried about reprisal?
Why are you recording me and asking that question? Bluntly, yes. Yes. I mean, I could probably go into all the reasons why and all the things he's done and all the things he's said. I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate for this audience, but you asked a question and there's your answer.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to confirm that you are not intending on gathering signatures.
No.
Intending on gathering.
She asked if I'm gathering signatures. I'm the only candidate not gathering signatures for the county attorney race. I know there was a hand somewhere back here. Oh, great. Where's one still?
Why are they gathering signatures? Because they get on the ballot by having someone sign it that's never done their homework?
You can ask them or her.
Okay, sorry.
So I want to clarify with like the DV court and everything. So I forget what you call it, the
pre-filing diversion.
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense, and you did a good job explaining. But I know there are like after filing types of diversion where they can take a plea, and then if they meet certain standards, then it goes away.
So I keep the legal jargon out of this as much as possible, because I just want to assume no one here's a lawyer. There's something called diversion, and I guess now we have to call it post-filing diversion. Is what we just used to call diversion. A diversion means the case is on hold, the defendant does not plead, you ask them to do things, and if they can prove that they've done it, the judge dismisses the case. Under state law, it's not available for all types of cases. Plea in abeyance means that the person gives a plea to the court, and the court holds it in abeyance, like the literal meaning. Or they just hold it aside for a period of time, and there's conditions, and if those are completed, the judge dusts that back off and says, yep, you completed it, case dismissed, charge is gone. So they're both a way to get a case dismissed without conviction, but the difference is, if the diversion, the person fails the diversion program, you start the prosecution all over. With a plea in abeyance, if they fail the plea in abeyance, the conviction they already or the guilty that they already said is entered as the conviction, and you just have sentencing.
Right.
And then you can have other types of resolutions that are short of incarceration and programs.
So I guess with the DV court and everything, working with people, you support those programs because they get a defendant, they get their day in court, instead of just the prosecutor holding everything. Do you support that? And
I think things work better when we have the ability to sit down to a table and talk it out, right? And that's one of the things that you can get in those types of courts. It's very hard to get in another type of court process. And it's not always going to work perfectly. And if you're asking whether we're going to have plea in abeyances, sometimes we're going to do it without plea in abeyances, sometimes, just like all the other types of courts that have that same modality.
well, I guess you had said he put like $1.4 million into that posting. Is your plan to kind of put that into those others, or what is your plan to take that money and put it, where would you put it program-wise instead of that post, that pre-divergence?
That's an excellent question, and the honest answer is, until I can see the current full budget and who's gonna stay in the office and who's gonna leave the office, I can't fully answer that. But yeah, I'm sure some of that money would go towards these other programs, and we have discretion to do so. That's actually something people don't understand. I'm not even sure my opponent understands that yet based off what people are telling me, is that it used to be the case that we have to specifically fund a position. And if you wanted to change that, they quit it, or you wanted to convert to something else, you had to get like the commissioner's approval. I was even asking a commissioner about that just to confirm today if that really had changed. And the commissioner told me very directly, no, now the county attorney really does have the authority to say, well, a prosecutor quit, but you need 2 victim advocates, you just shift the money, go ahead. So yeah, there's a lot more flexibility in our budget now. Anything else?
No.
Anyone else? I know it's getting late, and thank you for all for staying, as long as you want, I'll be here.
Just for my own curiosity, but the comment about self-defense. Something sticks in my mind, something, I think it's called the Castle Doctrine, about, you know, to what level you can defend yourself in your home. Can you explain that quickly, briefly, and what it is in Utah County?
Yeah, so the Castle Doctrine is something they teach you in law school to scare you, and because we have to use big names and archaic names. It's just a simple concept. The home is your castle, right? And just like the king is the king, you are the king of your castle, right? And so basically it's like you don't have a duty to retreat in your home, like, right? So this gentleman, we're out on the street, we get into an argument, I escalate, he escalates, and I escalate. At some point there maybe was a duty to retreat or to not escalate further before you pull out that gun and shoot. The Castle Doctrine is the idea that if you're in your own home, you don't have a duty to retreat. And that's very simple. And we'll just say, for sake of argument here, we can get out the statute and talk about all that thing. But Utah law is very supportive of the concept that in your own home you have the right to defend yourself. Let's just leave it at that simple way of doing it. Yeah.
Do you have a stance on custodial interference cases?
Well, you have a specific question? I mean,
I've just dealt with a lot of them as a family law attorney, and
as a what attorney?
Family law.
Yeah.
There are 2 sides to everything, and in some cases you're just dealing with 2 warring parents, and one of them gets like a private investigator to, you know, note that the other party is not sending the children out, but then you have teenagers that make their own decisions, or you have court cases where a judge has said, yeah, mom had a reason for doing this, and I recommended this, and dad didn't do it, and still they proceed with the prosecution against mom, who was just trying to protect kids. So there's a lot of things on both sides, and I'm just wondering if you have thoughts.
Yeah, so it's always tough when you have words on both sides, right? But it's kind of like every case, right? Like Tinder date rape cases. What's the excuse, right? It was consensual. She asked for it. She wanted it. She was into it. And she's saying, I definitely was not into this, right? And we're always going to have this in the law. And it's going to be in theft cases and rape cases and custodial interference cases. And all I can say is we're going to have to do the best we can with the evidence before us. And I'll admit, we probably won't always get the judgment call right? I'm not here to tell you under my administration will be perfect. I'm just here to tell you that under my administration we're going to try our best. And we're going to actively seek in every case to take account of all those different things to come to the best decision. And not have a predisposition to say, screw the dad, screw the mom, nothing like that, right? Those are tough cases.
They are.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I play on TV.
Come on up, you can finish this off for me.
But, you know, and it probably has nothing to do with your office, but I am very concerned with, you know, a lot of these cases we're talking about, and you may not see it here locally, but everything that's happening outside is coming here.
Yeah.
Eventually you will see it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at a lot of what's going on with corruption that's going on in federal agencies. And, you know, like, how could you, as our prosecutor, help stand up to protect us? Like right now, you got the ATF who is illegally keeping gun records on who goes and buys a gun.
Yeah.
And I look at, and I come from the point of view that anytime I go purchase a gun, and I have to fill out a background check, to me, that's illegal, unconstitutional, immoral, and, you know, it shouldn't be there. It's been proven that it doesn't work, it has no effect on crime, and, you know, but I see a lot of these things, it's trickling in, and it's gonna get here. And I see sheriffs, law enforcement, prosecutors as kind of our last defense on protecting our liberties and our freedoms, and so I just wonder where you, and I know there's things where you may not agree with the law, but you do have to prosecute it, because that's what the state legislature says, but I also look at a lot of this stuff where it's like, okay, this is grossly unconstitutional.
So, there's the anti-commandeering doctrine, I guess you could call it, which basically says, as a state official, I don't have to cooperate with the federal official. I can't necessarily impede them. I can't break a federal law and expect to get away with it. Right. But if they say, can we borrow your county resources to pursue this law that you disagree with? We can give them the middle finger and say, see you later. No. I mean, to put it crassly, that's what you can do, right?
Right.
Here's the way I think about things, is right now we have a horrible relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's not to your benefit. We should have good functioning relationships with our federal counterparts. Because there are times when cases should go in federal, right? But at the same time, it has to be one of those kind of arm distance friendly relationships where it's a really good collaboration, but where we also have the ability to say, no, we aren't helping with that one. And we just have to analyze that step by step and in the individual case on, you know, is this a federal government program we support or not?
What about even local things, you know, open up a giant can of worms here, we've got COVID-19 that's been going on for 2 years. And I know you expressed that, you know, you don't believe in the mandates, but I take it one step further. You know, your health should be between you and your doctor. Your doctor typically only gets it right 25% of the time anyway, what's going on with it. And then, you know, people are saying, well, it's private property, you have to wear a mask if they tell you to. Well, my grocer isn't my doctor, and, you know, and neither is Vivint Arena to tell me I've got to have a vaccine mandate to go and patronize their business.
Yeah. And
I look at it as, you know, this is a liberty issue. You're not my doctor, you're not my physician, and even if you were, I can still say, you know what, doc, I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot going on where, you know, I look at it as, you can't discriminate on race, gender, sex, religion, whatever, to go to the grocery store across the street here. But, you know, now all of a sudden, there's a perceived threat with the virus that, and now everybody, you have to wear a mask, or you have to do this. And I think there's a big difference between private property, like say at my house. If I don't want you there, you have to leave, period, end of story, right?
Yeah.
But there's a big, you know, then there's private property of a brick and mortar store like the grocery store over here. They can't discriminate against certain things. And so I look at that as, you know, if I don't want to get the vaccine, if I don't want to wear a mask, those are all medical devices, and that should be my choice. Whether you think it spreads, you know, disease or anything else, it's, you know, up until now, it's never been the law that they could discriminate. It should be.
Yeah, it's been prosecutors failing to stand up for the people. And law enforcement.
Okay, so
not prosecutors.
We're fighting that.
Legislators.
Well, it's not what you said, but is that a specific question you have with that?
Well, my specific question is, you know, standing up to stuff like that, you know.
Look,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's still about.
Yeah.
But there's like not a lot you can do, right? As a county, as a county attorney, like somebody would have to, law enforcement would have to like bring a case to you.
Yeah,
against, like,
that's
a
the
business
issue. You
owner.
have so many layers there that it's very hard to say in any given scenario, right? 'Cause
Well-
the state has to pass it, or the county has to pass it, and the law enforcement has to pursue it. And my answer is gonna be the same, right? Like, I don't want that. I will publicly say I don't want that. But as a county attorney, I have the responsibility to uphold the rule of law, and I can't just for political points pick and choose which laws I like.
I understand.
Right? And so, but what I can do is say, when a law is passed, we have to really look to see if it's worth the resources in individual cases. And maybe in most of those types of cases it wouldn't be, but we still have to look at it.
So like for example, you know, like if I wanna go to Smith's over here and they require a mask and a vaccine passport and, you know, proof of anything else that they want to implement, but every grocery store in a 100-mile radius requires that, you know, I'm kind of pigeonholed, where am I getting my food from? I just wanna go in and buy Fruit Loops and a head of cabbage and be on my way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's totally just a can of worms, because then there's the whole thing, are they doing it voluntarily, because that's truly what they believe for their customers and employees, or is it because of the government on the back end
Right.
twisting it on, right?
Well, it's not even necessarily the government, you're talking about an edict for the health department in one of those.
Does anybody know what time it is? 9:06?
8:56.
8:56. Great, so we're supposed to be gone in like 4 minutes. I have to take it outside. How about I take one last question? Well, have you asked one?
No,
You want
super
one?
quick.
If you haven't, go ahead.
Yeah, you brought up, back to the backlog. Is that a simple fix if you're elected? I mean, I know it's work, but like, do you have?
As long as you understand the difference between fixing what's leading to it and digging yourself out of the hole, yeah, it's a simple fix.
Okay.
But it's gonna take us time to fix it.
So that means the reason that we have the backlog is because things are mishandled. And if you handle them correctly, you can over time dig yourself.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming. As everyone leaves, I'm happy to clean up and talk about more questions. Thank you.
I did have one more question.
Yeah, sure. Make cookies.